हर एक सिपाही की ज़िंदगी में ये सबसे बड़ा सपना होता है जो कि आज पूरा हुआ है। दूसरी बात, लड़ाई के मैदान में मैं तुम्हारे साथ सबसे आगे आऊँगा बिना हथियार के, और मेरे पास सिर्फ ये वॉकिंग स्टिक रहेगी, और तुम्हें मैं ऐसे खतरे में नहीं डालूंगा जिसे मैं खुद नहीं कर सकता हूँ। और आखिरी बात, मैंने उन्हें कहा इस पूरे ऑपरेशन में हमारा नारा रहेगा विजय या वीर गति। या तो हम विजय हासिल करेंगे या वीर गति को प्राप्त होंगे।
In the next few days, they would stare death in the face, remain without food and water, shed their blood, but return with their heads held high. Major Rajesh Adhikari, Captain Nimbalkar, and Lieutenant Balwan planned their final assault. Even as Adhikari was leaving, he received a letter from home which had been sent up with supplies from the base. Instead of reading the letter, Adhikari stuffed it into his pocket and prepared to leave. When asked to read his letter before he went up, Adhikari retorted, "The letter is from Kiran, my wife. I know what will be written. The 7th of June is my first wedding anniversary and she wants me to spend it with her. Now how do I explain to her that I can't get leave? Time is running out. I'll read the letter when I get to the top. The suspense will keep me going." For 48 hours, Adhikari and his brave men fought their way up, inch by perilous inch, attacking the enemy in 2 columns. Adhikari reached nearly 30 yards from the Barbad bunker when the enemy opened fire from 2 mutually supported UMGs.
मेजर राजेश अधिकारी एक बहुत ही बहादुर ऑफिसर और उससे बढ़कर एक निहायत ही अच्छे इंसान थे। ये मैकेनाइज इन्फेंट्री के ऑफिसर्स थे जो मेरे साथ 1 साल की अटैचमेंट में मेरे साथ थे, और ये अटैचमेंट 24 जून को ख़त्म होने वाली थी, जबकि ये बीच में लड़ाई चल पड़ी। ये बात है 28-29 मई की। और सबसे बड़ी बात जो इनमें मैंने देखी, वो कोई भी काम मैंने दिया, इन्होंने हमेशा इस काम के लिए वॉलंटियर किया, अपने आप सबसे आगे किया। जब इनको मैंने ये टास्क दिया कि आप तोलोलिंग पे कब्जा करोगे, हमला करेंगे, ये खुद कंपनी के सबसे आगे थे। और हमले में जब तकरीबन बर्बाद बंकर के पास बिल्कुल पहुंचने वाले थे, आखिरी बंकर था, उससे पहले इन्होंने बाकी बंकर कब्जे में कर लिए थे। इनको गोली लग गई वहां पे और ये घायल हो गए, और मेरा इनसे रेडियो सेट पे मिलाप टूट गया। और जो इनका रेडियो ऑपरेटर था लांस नायक राजेंद्र, वो मेरे साथ रेडियो सेट पे आया कि साहब को गोली लग चुकी है और काफ़ी गंभीर रूप से घायल हैं, और बहुत इतना फायर है कि हम बाएं या दाएं या किसी भी तरफ मुड़ नहीं सकते, और बल्कि मैं भी उनके पास नहीं जा सकता, क्योंकि मैं हर बार उनको कह रहा था मेरी उनसे बात कराइए। तो कह रहा साहब कि हम जहाँ पे भी पिन डाउन हुए वहाँ से हम निकल नहीं सकते हैं। और बड़ी अजीबोगरीब बात एक बार फिर हुई कि जब वो ऑपरेटर मेरे से बात कर रहा था, और बात करते करते वो बहुत जोर से चलाया, क्योंकि उसे भी मेरे से बात करते करते गोली लग गई और वहीं दम तोड़ गया।
Adhikari never made it back for his first wedding anniversary. When the body was finally recovered on the 13th of June, Kiran's letter was found in Rajesh's pocket, still unopened. This brave officer was awarded a Mahavir Chakra by a grateful nation. In the next few days after Rajesh's death, the Grenadiers consolidated their position on the hill. They built up stocks of ammunition while Thakur and Vishwanathan built up their morale. Under constant threat of sniper attacks and enemy shelling, these soldiers lived in the open, crouched behind rocks. Tea was a luxury. Food would take 24 hours to reach them and would be barely edible. While holding positions on the hill, they received letters from home, sent messages back through the base. Some, like Vishwanathan, even found time for a little prayer.
जो कर्नल विश्वनाथन साहब आज हमारे बीच नहीं हैं, और वो एक देवता इंसान थे और पूजा पाठ में, भक्ति में उनका बहुत ज़्यादा मन लग गया था। तो वो लास्ट टाइम में भी नीचे से बोले, हवलदार लीलाराम, आप मेरे लिए थोड़ा अगरबत्ती वगैरह भेजना ऊपर, मैं थोड़ा धूप बत्ती करूँगा। तो मैंने उनके लिए नीचे से प्रोवाइड की और ऊपर भिजवाई।
On the 2nd of June, another plan was formulated to launch an assault on point 4590 and the Tuloling top from the southern approach. Massive covering fire was to be given from the southeastern and southwestern spurs. Heavy artillery fire commenced from 8:30 p.m. that evening and continued till past midnight in an attempt to soften up the enemy. What was remarkable about this assault that it was not led by a company commander, but by the commanding officer, Colonel Kushal Thakur, and his second in command, Lieutenant Colonel Ramakrishnan Vishwanathan. Earlier that day, Vishwanathan had requested his CO to let him lead the assault. As per convention, a commanding officer should always remain 2 companies behind an assault. Thakur had refused, saying, "How can I send my men into this kind of danger unless I'm willing to lead them there myself?" The assault started at 1 a.m. By 2 a.m., Vishwanathan had blown up 2 enemy Sangars in his charge to the top. Thakur, codenamed Akbar, lost his radio operator and was attempting to reach Vishwanathan, codenamed Kerala, on his radio set. Vishu's radio operator informed Thakur that the 2IC was attempting to blow up the 3rd enemy position and was at present engaged in a hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. This brave Lieutenant Colonel destroyed 3 enemy Sangars, killed 4 of the enemy in close combat, finally succumbed to his injuries, winning a posthumous Veer Chakra, becoming the senior-most officer to die in the Kargil conflict.
लड़ाई में काफ़ी सारे नाजुक मोड़ आते हैं। ऐसा लगता है शायद ज़िंदगी आपका इम्तिहान ले रही हो। ये घटना जो मैं कहना चाहता हूँ, रात 2 और 3 जून की, प्रभात बंकर से दूरी हमारी तकरीबन 30 गज और पूरे देश की निगाहें थी तोलोलिंग के ऊपर, और हमने तकरीबन 4 हमले कर चुके थे, लेकिन पूर्ण सफलता तोलोलिंग पे प्राप्त नहीं हो रही थी। जब हम वहाँ पे 20-22 दिन तक ये हमला करते रहे, रात दिन, और आखिर में मेरे दोस्त, मेरे सेकंड इन कमांड, जो मेरे छोटे भाई से भी बढ़ के मुझसे अजीज़ थे, कर्नल विश्वनाथन, और मैंने खुद, दोनों ने फैसला किया कि बर्बाद बंकर और तोलोलिंग के लिए हम खुद हमले में जाएंगे, क्योंकि पूरे देश की निगाहें थी कि कब तोलोलिंग को कब्जे में लिया जाएगा। रात को तकरीबन 1 बजे जब हमने हमला शुरू किया, जब हम तकरीबन आधा रास्ता पार कर ही पाए थे, और इस हमले में कर्नल विश्वनाथ सबसे आगे थे, लीड कर रहे थे, हम सब के ऊपर बहुत भारी तादाद में दुश्मन का फायर आया और हम वहीं पे पिन डाउन हो गए। ये टाइम था जब हमारा भी उनके ऊपर काफ़ी फायर हो रहा था। कर्नल विश्वनाथ ने आगे से मुझे कहा कि सर अपना फायर बंद करवाइए। बड़ा अजीबो गरीब इत्तेफाक है, जब मैं सेट से बात कर रहा था तो सेट थोड़ा मैंने आगे खींचा, जब क्रॉल कर रहा था तो मैंने देखा मेरा ऑपरेटर लांस हवलदार राम कुमार शहीद हो चुका है। सूबेदार रणधीर जो मेरे से थोड़ा आगे थे, मैंने उनको आवाज़ लगाई, जो साथ में लड़का था वो कहता है साहब भी शहीद हो चुके हैं। इसी दौरान जो ऑपरेटर था 2IC साहब का, विश्वनाथन साहब का, उन्होंने मेरे को आवाज़ लगाई कि साहब 2IC साहब की गोली लग चुकी है और बहुत भारी फायर है, और फिर भी साहब बड़ी बहादुरी से फायर करते जा रहे हैं। तो मैंने एकदम कहा कि इनको पीछे खींचिए, इनको सेफ जगह पे लाइए। 2-3 लड़के लेके मैं खुद आगे जाके उनको पीछे लाया। बर्फ थी, मौसम बहुत ख़राब था। वो ठीक थे, बातचीत कर रहे थे। मैंने कहा विश्वनाथ कोई बात नहीं, आप ठीक हो जाओगे। फायर के बीच में हम उनको नीचे लाए। नीचे तकरीबन लाने में आधा पौना घंटा हमको लगा। उनकी हमने फर्स्ट एड की। शायद भाग्य की विडंबना थी, ये होना तय था। वो मेरे गोद में थे। मैंने उनको काफ़ी उनके हाथ को गर्म करने की कोशिश की, उनके पाँव को गर्म करने की कोशिश की, लेकिन वो मेरे गोद में आखिरी दम तोड़ गए। ये वो घटना है जिस घटना को हम सब 18 ग्रेनेडियर्स के परिवार में जिंदगी भर नहीं भुला सकते।
भुला नहीं सकते वतन पे ये एहसान। सूनी कलाई सूनी बाहें आंगन है वीरा। तू है दोस्त हमको याद रहेगा। भारत को हमेशा तुझ पर नाज रहेगा।
I rang up the CO sometimes in the afternoon and offered my condolences and told him how sorry I was that Vishy was no more. And since they had also lost a very brave officer about 2 days before that, Rajesh Adhikari. So I told him that, look, you're the commanding officer and at this time the whole battalion is looking up to you. So get a hold of yourself, get a hold of your battalion and be ready for the next task.
हमको याद रहेगा। भारत को हमेशा तुझ पर नाज रहेगा।
As May turned to June, the army continued taking heavy losses in Kargil. But by now, enough evidence was available to show that the army was not fighting a ragtag bunch of Afghan Mujahideen or Kashmiri militants. It had been established without doubt that this was not a Pakistani-backed intrusion, but a deliberate incursion by the regular Pakistani army. Ample evidence was available of the presence of units of Pakistan's Northern Light Infantry. Even as the Indian Prime Minister rejected Pakistan's demand to stop air strikes, he accepted Nawaz Sharif's proposal to send Sartaj Aziz to India. Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh added that meaningful dialogue between the two neighbors could only happen after the sanctity of the line of control was restored. Defence Minister George Fernandes ruled out cessation of ground action until every square inch of Indian territory had been cleared of the enemy. The Indian army went on full alert all along the border in Rajasthan and Punjab, even as the airstrikes were resumed in full force. As international pressure on Pakistan increased, cracks began to appear in its leadership. Sartaj Aziz flew in and out of Delhi with no impact on the conflict. Meanwhile, the Indian horizon saw its first glimmer of joy. In the ongoing World Cup matches, India conclusively beat Pakistan at the Old Trafford. In Dras, the 8th Sikh had established encampments all around Tiger Hill. Their radio operators interrupted curt messages from Pakistani officers to their men.
The World Cup match was going on, and I had an access to a transistor, and I was keenly hearing the commentary. So as soon as the match got over and the result was out that Pakistan has lost the match, so I started relaying this message to each and every post, because they didn't have an access to the transistor, and telling them what the result has been. So while I was doing that, एक हल्की सी बीच में आवाज़ आई कि भैया आप क्यों इतनी तकलीफ कर रहे हो, हम ही दे देते मैसेज. So that is how we got to know someone is listening to us, and that person got so frustrated that he came to our, he started talking on our frequency, and then we immediately changed our frequency. Then later on after a few days, we intercepted an even more interesting message. The message was कि एक पाकिस्तानी दूसरे से बात कर रहा था. He was telling भाई ये क्रिकेट मैच तो हार चुके हो, भाई ये ना हार जाना.
Despite this brief surge of Pakistani pessimism, they were still very much in control of the heights. Under tremendous pressure for results, the 8th Mountain Division of General Puri had started a massive artillery deployment, including the infamous Bofors gun.
The artillery has played a tremendous role in the entire operations. We tried out the Bofors guns, the very famous Bofors guns, and we developed a tremendous amount of confidence in them. They were used in a new concept of employment, like they were used in direct firing role. When I say direct firing role, I say you deploy the gun over here, and it is visible. The objective is visible to the gun, to the people who are the gunners, the crew of the gun, and then they fired directly onto the objective.
Throughout the conflict, the artillery was to come in for lavish praise from the humble Jawan right up to the corps commander.
It was the first time that artillery was employed in a very unique manner. We had these 155mm guns. I won't say, I don't want to say that Bofors or anything, but it's the caliber which matters. It's not the make, whether it was 155mm Bofors or even if it was the Austrian gun or the French gun Sofma, they would have done as well, because there are only marginal differences in each one of them. But this 155mm guns, they were the mainstay of this battle. We also used them in a very, very innovative manner, and these ideas also came from down below. It was Brigadier Lakhvinder Singh, who was the Commander Artillery Brigade, who tried them, tested them in direct firing role. We didn't know. Earlier on we used to think that these guns can fire and engage targets only at about 3 to 4 kilometers in direct firing. And to our amazement, at 11-12 kilometer range, these guns were so effective, which made the task of the infantry very easy. The contribution of artillery was unique, and the manner in which artillery was used, actually it was used as a combat arm.
Though the artillery under its dynamic commander Brigadier Lakhvinder Singh was to perform with remarkable success, living up to its motto, Sarvatra Izzat-o-Iqbal. Its deployment in the mountains for high-altitude warfare was not without problems.
There are a number of problems. You have very few areas available for deployment. Then the features in front of you are very high, so normally by and large you fire at high angle. The other problems that you have is that mountains, especially rocky mountains that you have here, do not take very kindly to a lighter weapon system. The impact is more profound if the shell is heavier, and that is where a heavier weight shell like Bofors or a heavier mortar, 160mm mortar, was very effective.
Initially they moved with caution, but soon they were developing new techniques combining experience with innovation.
Our mind ran back to the history, and we thought of the days of Babur and Ranjit Singh, where simple guns were used for direct firing and quite effectively. If that was the case, why not a sophisticated weapon system like the Bofors gun?
Very soon in the battle, the foot soldier came to look upon the Bofors with great affection.
This is the famous Bofors gun, which was a mainstay during the Battle of Daras. By the time a 42 kilos projectile leaves this barrel here, it gains a speed of 837 meters per second. In planes, the shell can land 30 kilometers away from this gun. In high altitude, because of rarefied air, the shell travels further 6 kilometers and we achieve a range of up to 36 kilometers. Gun is state-of-art technology and has tremendous advantages over other guns. One of them is a very fast rate of fire. It can fire 3 rounds in 14 seconds, which is a very good rate of fire. It has a system called the APU, the Auxiliary Power Unit, which functions all the systems of the guns and can also move the gun for shorter distances. That is why this gun is known to have shoot and scoot capability.
As the artillery was moving into place, the preparations of the infantry for a final assault on Tulaling were also underway.
2 Rajrif was the battalion which first arrived on the scene, and they were given the task to capture Tulaling. We took about 11 or 12 days to really prepare for this operation. The battalion had to get acclimatized. The commanding officer and the rest of the officers had to carry out a proper reconnaissance of the objective. So this took about 11-12 days, and by that time I was quite confident that at least the battalion was ready for the task for which I had sort of earmarked them.
The Rajputana Rifles was the oldest rifle regiment of the Indian Army, its first battalion being raised as far back as January 1775. The 2 Raj Rifles had the honor of winning the first Victoria Cross ever given to the Indian Army. This was won by Captain John Augustus in 1856 in Persia. This battalion had now camped out at Minamarg, practicing war skills when they received their marching orders in early June. They moved from Minamarg and took up positions in and around Tulaling.
Standing here, one can appreciate the importance of Tulaling in the Battle of Kargil. On to my left, you see Tulaling, which is approximately about 4 to 5 kilometers from this road, Srinagar-Leh. The importance of this road lies in the fact that it is the only road link from Srinagar to Leh. This road is not open throughout the year. It's open generally from about June to October, and this is the season in which the complete stocking for Leh sector has to be done. So hence it was very important that Tulaling be the first feature to be captured.
Now began the arduous task of planning and reconnaissance. Colonel M.B. Ravindranath, who personified the adage of an officer and a gentleman, was a soldier right down to his boots, and it showed in his meticulous planning. He and Major Vivek Gupta met with Colonel Kushal Thakur of the 18 Grenadiers for a debrief. Thakur was still holding a firm base up the hill. Ravindranath then sent his young officers for a recce of the objective. When they met back for a debrief, Ravindranath came to a frightening conclusion. There was no route for an attack on Tulaling except for the route chosen by the Grenadiers.
And as a military man, I was very apprehensive of attacking Tulaling from directions from which the attacks had already failed, because that's generally the thing you are not supposed to do. But yet, once we found that we had no other option, then I discussed with my company commanders, that's Vivek and Mohit. Then we said we have to work a method of attacking through the same areas where the attacks have not been successful before.
Even as Ravindranath was exploring strategic options, he was also stocking ammunition and supplies. Carrying 800 porter loads of material up the hill to the firm base was a nightmare.
The most tense period was when we started building up. The amount of stores which had to be carried up really put a lot of stress onto my men. Even my cooks, barbers, whose duty it is not to do this kind of a work, they volunteered and they said, no, it is the izzat of the battalion. And I am quite sure that went a long way in motivating the other people to say that if a barber can do this for the battalion, why can't I do something more?
ये भाई साहब हमारे जो अभी कटिंग कर रहे हैं, ये बार्बर, ये भी साथ साथ चलते रहे. इनका काम था पीछे पीछे अनुमेशन पहुंचाना.
जब हमारी पूरी पलटन चढ़ रही थी टोरोलिंग पर, तो हम पीछे कैसे रह सकते हैं, इसलिए हम इनको साथ चलते रहे।
As D-Day drew close in an unprecedented gesture, General Puri arrived on the front to bid these brave men Godspeed and good luck.
3 or 4 days before the attack was to be launched, I went and spoke to the men. I addressed the whole battalion and spoke to them of their regimental traditions, of the old history of the battalion, how well they had done in various wars, the fine commanders which they had in the battalion, this commanding officer who was an outstanding person. And I also mentioned to them that, look, war comes once in a lifetime.
Ravindranath decided on launching 2 simultaneous attacks. One from the southwestern spur led by Major Mohit Saxena on point 4590 and the Barbad Bunker complex. The Ghataks under Captain Kengruze were to go behind the feature to cut off any counter-attack. The direct assault on the Tululing top and the flat area would be led by Major Vivek Gupta and his Charlie company.
I had chosen this company because this happened to be my champion company, and this company had some that instinct to win. When I told them, I said that you are the champion company of the battalion, and let's see whether you can prove that you are only a champion company in the sports field or you are also as good in the battlefield. And the kind of response I got there was overwhelming, and some of them are not with me, but the words they said to me before they left are etched in my mind. Bhawarlal told me, he said, साहब अब आपको सुबह हमें मिलो टॉप के ऊपर 3 बजे, हम चाय पिलाएगा आपको. He is no more, but at 3 o'clock I was there on the top, and he had kept his promise, but I could not tell him shabash. And then I had this Dharamveer who was leading another platoon. He told me, he shook my hand and told me, he said, साहब आर या पार, धर्मवीर या उधर मिलेगा या मरा हुआ मिलेगा, लेकिन आपको वो फ्लैट एरिया आपको मिलेगा. एंड यशवीर अगेन CHM यशवीर, he said, साहब हमारा चैंपियन कंपनी है, दिखाएंगे कि ज़मीन पे भी चैंपियन है, आप सुबह वहाँ पर मिलो. Again that man is no more. I couldn't congratulate him and tell him that yes, you chaps have proved your worth.
Ravindranath's champion company commander chosen to capture Tululing had more than one reason to celebrate. Being on the verge of a divorce with his wife, Captain Rajshri Bisht, Vivek had just received a letter from her asking for a reconciliation. Brimming over with happiness, Vivek had shared this news with Ravindranath, even as he promised his CO the capture of Tululing. The final assault on Tululing began on the night of the 12th, 13th of June at 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, this is how the Tululing Ridge would look like. This, if is Tululing, this would be hump and this would be 5140. So enemy had captured this. This is the top, Tululing top. Enemy was holding on to this. This was what was known as the general area of Barbad Bunker. So this was also held by the enemy. And this is the southwestern approach, and this is the southeastern approach. So what you see here represents the fire base where we had established the fire base for southeastern approach, and this is the fire base which was established for southwestern approach. So as I told you before, we had decided to attack it from 2 directions. One company was to attack top from here. Another company was to attack Barbad Bunker from this side. So on 12th, when the firing started, we were able to engage this Barbad Bunker and Snow top, or this Tululing top, with direct firing of artillery, and this whole thing was brought under artillery fire. Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram,
As Major Mohit Saxena and Captain Nikozake Kengruze started their assault on point 4590, Major Sandeep Bajaj, the second in command of the battalion, was directing RL fire from a firm base 400 yards below.
The attack was progressing at about 11 in the night. Mohit had taken the first 2 features on 4590. Nemo had reached behind the Pakistanis, and I was in the fire base about 400 meters from where the attack was going on. So it was my job to control the fire, whatever fire Mohit or Nemo asked for, I had to get it onto the objective. Then the battle started in great earnest. The Pakistanis came 25-30 strong, started attacking his position. So we decided that we'll hit the Pakistanis with the only effective weapon that we had for that area, that was the rocket launcher. So now it was a tough job, you know. Mohit was sitting here, Nemo was sitting here, the Pakistanis were in between, and I had to fire into between them. So I had to take corrections from both these guys. So first shot I fired, I think I almost killed Mohit. I almost killed him. Huh? So he was thrown on the radio set. I was Rahim, and Nemo was Nemo. Nemo can only be Nemo. So we fired. I fired first shot. I think almost killed him, and he shouted back on the radio set, "Sir, but that's on my head." So I said, "Okay, hold. I'll give the next shot a plus." And we gave the next shot a plus, and Nemo behind. It landed, I think, almost on his head. So he got me on the radio set. He says, "Sir," he used to speak in a very measured tone. He says, "Sir, but you almost killed me." So I said, "No, this is a very, very funny battle going on." But we managed to get the corrections, and slowly we got the Pakistanis where we wanted.